So this morning I opened the bag of vegetables that came from 8th and Poplar Farm yesterday, and I had a large zucchini and some other things, and I thought I'm going to take that and make myself a simple lunch. So I know one of the recipes we're talking about this week is pasta sauce, and I made a different kind of pasta, which was just a sautéed vegetable and warm noodles seasoned with garlic, olive oil, and some basil. So I cut the zucchini up into cubes. I heated up oil till it was quite hot. I used a pan large enough to put the zucchini in one layer, and then the cubes of zucchini were put in the pan and left to sizzle. I left them in there cooking for 5 to 7 minutes. Really, I wanted to get some brown on those zucchini. The zucchini was quite moist. It was a very big zucchini, and I wanted to make sure it had both tenderized and flavored. So I took some fresh garlic, I peeled it, I minced it. I don't seem to have taken a picture of the mincing. Meanwhile, on another burner, I've got some water getting ready to come to a boil. I've added some salt, and then I'm going to add the penne noodles so that the penne can be cooking while the zucchini is browning. So the zucchini I'm going to season now with a little bit of fennel seed and some minced garlic, and then a little bit more pepper. And then I'm taking a spatula and flipping the brown parts so that the parts that haven't cooked yet are flipped. And you don't see a lot of brown here, but there is some brown forming. Then once I flipped it, I checked the seasoning. I probably added a little more salt and pepper. Definitely added the minced garlic and let that cook. Okay, so you can see a little bit of brown. I then sprinkled some Parmesan cheese that was grated and let that cook for a few minutes. Then I just turned off the pan and let it sit. Meanwhile, I was checking the penne to see how it was doing, and I was getting ready with the fresh tomato, which I was going to add for both color, flavor, and juice to this sauce. I'm not cooking this tomato. I'm just adding it in to the warm noodles and the warm zucchini you'll see in a few minutes. So I'm slicing the tomato, and then I'm going to stack those slices and slice them the other direction, and then I'm going to turn them and slice them the other direction to make cubes. Meanwhile, I've checked the pasta. It's ready. I am draining the pasta in a colander, and then I saved a little bit of the pasta liquid in case I needed it. It turned out I didn't use it, but I often save pasta liquid because it's starchy and it can help thicken a sauce. But I realized I was going to be eating this room temperature and I wasn't cooking it anymore. So the zucchini's done. It's sitting in the pan. The noodles are done. I put them in a bowl. I take the zucchini that's seasoned with the fennel and the garlic and salt and pepper, and I scoop it on top of the penne. I toss that. I add those chopped tomatoes, then I'll toss that. And then while that's sitting and the juices are all getting together, I went out to the garden to find some basil. So I found this small windowsill basil, which is a miniature basil. I pulled a few of those leaves. I found some larger leaf basil, Genovese basil, and I pinched off some of those leaves. And then I looked around the garden to see what else might be nice in this lunch, and I noticed some edible flowers. So I grow a bunch of flowers that are both pretty in the garden but also can be eaten. These are nasturtiums. They taste peppery like watercress. Both the leaves and the flowers are edible. Brought a few of them in to garnish my lunch. And this beautiful purple kale, I thought, well, a purple kale would be lovely. So I took a few leaves of kale and a few leaves of this arugula, which again was growing in one of my garden beds. So I went back into the kitchen and I took the kale and just finely sliced it. Again, it was young leaves of kale. I didn't need to take the stems off, but if it was older kale, I would have taken the stems off and I probably would have cooked it a little bit. This was tender, so I didn't need to cook it. I did put it in with the hot noodles and toss it. So this is the basil. I took the basil, I looked at it, there's a stem and there's the leaves. I held the stem and I pulled off the leaves gently. It's easy to bruise basil, so you try to be gentle with it. I made a stack of the basil leaves. I then took a sharp knife, rolled the basil leaves up and sliced them thin. That's called chiffonade. I made a chiffonade of basil, which is thin sliced basil, again, not minced, not chopped, not bruised. And then I just tossed those sliced leaves of basil on top of the warm pasta, and again, that was added like nice flavor. This is the windowsill basil, very little leaves. I just chopped that coarsely. So now the kale has been in there cooking with the hot noodles. The noodles are not as hot now. I added the basil. I checked for seasoning, salt and pepper. and it was then ready for lunch.